obscure enough that we're not going to hit Comedy Central's radar. But maybe I'll.
Didn't we get we did get like
We got
bleep
demonetized. What's funny is that we
demonetized
don't
on
actually
YouTube, right?
monetize anyways. But like YouTube explicitly marked one of ours as non-monetizable or something, and it was because Nick was singing a song to himself. I want to say it was "Endless Love," but I don't think it was "Endless Love." It was
He
something
had
like
one
that.
where he was like singing the Rickroll song, right? Like, and he Nick rolled
Yes, he
us.
sang Rick Roll, but it wasn't being recorded or something. This one
Yeah.
was like everybody went on break. It was live on YouTube. Both the his co-host, I wasn't on the episode, but his co-host and the guest both went to the bathroom, and Nick was sitting there all by himself, and he started singing a song. I can't remember what song it was. He would remember. And they marked our stream as demonetized. And I came back and it says why, and it said like the artist's song was the one that Nick was singing, which credit to Nick because it sounded close enough that
Yeah,
their
that's a
AI bots
compliment.
Yeah,
picked it
that's
up.
impressive.
I feel like that was we had like a string of 4 or 5 episodes where somebody would sing in each one.
Yes.
Nick probably was the best delivery. But
Yeah, because he can actually sing, I think. I cannot. I don't know about you, KBall. I know you can dance, but I'm not sure if you can sing. Although you did do a pretty good Moana.
try what I can.
I see what's happening here.
Yeah, I wandered through 3 different keys, but
I thought you did it on purpose. All right, we are live. Hello, internet. We'll put out another tweet saying that we're live. And then we'll kick off the show here.
we did have a great song by a guest too, but she actually like did Broadway previously and other stuff. Like she's
Oh, yeah.
kind of pro.
Yep, we put that one in there. That was the, it's Unix, I Know This. That was funny.
Man, I wish I could sing. But it's like at a certain point, if you can't sing, nobody wants you to practice.
Yeah, like when you're a kid, it's cute. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
they're trying to sing.
Oh,
And then when
they're
you're adult, it's
bad.
like, no, you should just go ahead and stop trying.
Yeah.
Well, you can sing on the podcast and you won't get us demonetized.
That's right.
That's true.
It's indistinguishable from noise. Not you, Amelia. I'm talking about myself. I've never heard you sing, but I've heard
Yeah.
me.
Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. How about you, Allie? Got a voice on you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Thankfully, we can all program,
Yeah. I'll write
So-
code.
It's
We can write software, which is also
modern day singing.
a valuable contribution to society. All right. Shall we just get right into it then? I should put a little thing in our
Sounds
channel
good.
here.
Yeah, I tend to categorize singing on the podcast not as music generation, but more like making a fool of myself. And so, that's adding value to society, right?
Definitely.
For sure. As long as you're not making a fool of Nebraskans. That subtracts from society.
Did you see Bone Skull's response in my tweet about that?
I did. I can't remember. All I saw was I got CC'd and something about Nebraska, but I didn't catch the whole gist of it.
I mean, it was just like, it was a funny thing. My wife described me to somebody as like a full stack developer, but mostly front end. And I was like, really? Is that what I am these days? And kind of was curious. So I tweeted
Right.
about it and was like, what would you call me? And Bone Skull was like, Nebraska antagonist.
That's great. Did you get a consensus besides obviously the troll answer the Bone Skull gave you? Are you full stack? Are you front end? What are you
I
now?
got a variety of things. I think the one that is probably the most accurate, honestly, today is like engineering manager. So
Right.
like the amount of coding I do has dropped quite a bit.
Feel that.
But I do still get some coding time some mornings because I get
Yeah.
up before everybody else. So there is
I've actually
that.
put some serious coding in this last 2 weeks, like multiple hours per day.
Nice.
It's been pretty amazing because I went for a long time, especially like it was like November through January of like reading code but not writing a lick of it, and it just sucks. Talking about it a lot. Like I don't want to be the guy that just talks about code. I write some of it. And then I realized like I can't remember my keyboard shortcuts and stuff. And I'm like, how's this if condition formatted? How do you loop? Anyways, getting it back. Let's start the show. Oh, yes, friends. You know the sound of those Breakmaster cylinder beats means it's time once again for JS Party. I'm Jared. I am your friend. I have three of my internet friends here with me. Amelia's here. What is up, Amelia?
Hey, not much.
You ready to rock?
Oh yeah,
You ready to
I'm ready.
sing?
Absolutely not.
Okay. KBall's here, always ready to dance. KBall, what's
You
up, man?
know it. I heard the BMC stick going, and I was rocking out over here.
You still
I missed
rocking
that.
multiple cups of coffee every morning? Are you on your coffee
Of
kick or?
course.
Of
I think
course.
what 4 today maybe.
4.
I
That's
don't know.
excessive.
We
KBall.
do 2 pots of a French press between my wife and I, and you know.
Wow, that's impressive.
And that voice that you hear is Allie Spittel. What's up, Allie?
Pretty good, pretty good. Have not had coffee today, so should get on that.
No
How do you
coffee.
survive?
How do you survive?
I try to do it like maybe 3 days a week so that I don't have the impact of it too much.
Okay.
Still
So do you
effective.
find that when you drink it less, that when you do drink it, it has more of an impact?
Totally, totally.
Because K-Ball just hooks up an IV right into his arm, and then he doesn't even feel anything. It's just like
Well,
just part of his
the other
bloodstream
thing
at this
though is
point.
like I finish. So I wake up at 5, right? So I wake up at 5 and I have my first cup of coffee and kind of get going. But I'm usually done with coffee by like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I don't have. The latest I ever have coffee is like lunchtime, and then I'm
Right.
done.
Well, waking up at 5, you'd probably don't have any problem sleeping at night, though.
None. I'm like out by 9 o'clock.
So that's awesome. So same with me. Like 9:30 if we're getting crazy. If it's party time, maybe make it to 10 p.m. maybe, just in case.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, nothing good happens after midnight, and then I just take a couple hours off just in case. I don't want to live dangerously. Today
And
we
that's why in the
have.
before times I love to go to the East Coast, because then I could actually behave like pretend I'm a normal adult for a little while and like stay up past 9 o'clock.
Well, your 9 o'clock is much later than our 9 o'clock. By the time you go to bed, it's 11 p.m. my time, and probably midnight Amelia's time.
Yep.
Oh no, 4 hours, right? I can't remember where you live again.
Me?
Amelia's
I'm
in DC,
DC, yeah.
right? So 4 hours ahead of K-Ball. Anyways, time zone. Or is that wrong? Is it 3?
3.
I think it's 3.
All 3 of you shook your head the other direction. Dang it! All right. Note to editor. Snip, snip. Let's do some segments, huh? And our brand new segment, my creation, I thought of this all myself. There was no way I stole the idea from Go Time. It was completely and all me. It's called Holla.
Can I holla? Can I holla at you? Can I holla at you? Can I holla, 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 holla.
So for Holla, which is where we holla at various community meetups, events, things going on. If you host a meetup or a conference that's upcoming and you'd like to have us holla at you, holla at us at JS Party FM. Today, we want to bring to your attention Ember.js Europe. So the Ember.js Europe meetup brings together the Ember community from all of Europe once every quarter, except the Emberfest quarter. I'm not sure which quarter that one is, but don't go to Ember Europe meetup that quarter. They won't be there. Every other quarter they will be. It's organized as a hybrid event hosted from a different city each time, with the option for people to join remotely as well. And they have an upcoming event Thursday, March 31st, their very first Ember Europe meetup. Already 15 attendees, and that will be both IRL and online. So check that out. We'll link it up in the show notes. It's on meetup.com, Ember-Europe. This has been your holla of the day.
Can I holla? Can I holla? Can I holla? Can I holla? Holla, 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 holla.
Jared, I want to hear you do that.
Can I holla? Can I holla? Can I holla? Holla, 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 holla. Are you sure you wanted to hear me do it?
I don't know. But it got me thinking, right? Like, what are other plays we can do on holla? Like, what's the friendliest type of bread? Holla.
I don't know that kind of bread. Is that a West Coast bread?
No, it's like a Jewish traditional bread. You have it on Shabbat.
Oh, I thought maybe it was like a proper noun kind of a thing, like a manufacturer.
No, it's a traditional. It's a delicious. It's slightly sweet, kind of eggy bread. So good. You are
Really
missing
tasty.
out, my
Is
friend.
anybody, Allie and
Maybe
Amelia, are
maybe
you
they
aware
just
of
don't
this?
have that in Nebraska.
Oh yeah.
But
You've never had challah?
No, I've never heard of it until right now. Hey,
try
it
it
reminds
out.
me.
Find a good Jewish deli that does
Okay.
challah French toast, and
Ooh.
you will thank me for the rest of your life.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to actually do that. Challah French toast. That reminds me, what's the hilly seaside neighborhood within the city of San Diego, California? Well, it's La Jolla, which is spelled the same as Holla, but unfortunately uses an AA. Anywho, today we're doing story of the week. Let's get it kicking.
It's time to take a peek. It's time for the story of the week.
Story of the week is our segment where we take turns sharing what we believe is the most important or the biggest or maybe just the most interesting to us story of the week or the recent times. Since we don't do this weekly, you can go back a little further than merely a week. Let's start off with Allie because I'm looking at the notes and I think she drilled it with the biggest story of recent times. Allie, what is it?
Well, Node made fetch happen. Fetch is coming to Node, which I am so excited about. This is something that I have been annoyed by at varying points of using Node, so very, very excited about it.
And it's top level and it's just going to be there. It's just right there for you to use. There's no imports. There's no extra namespacing. You don't have to do anything. You just type fetch.
It's
Now,
amazing.
I know there were
Is that
some
right?
challenges
Yeah.
in getting that to happen, right? Do you know anything about what made it hard? Why was this such a long time coming?
I have no idea. That's a great question.
Where's our Node.js experts, Chris or Nick? They're not here. They're not on the show today. I do know it's been a long time coming. I do know that I looked at the thread on GitHub on the, not the issue, but the PR that was merged, and it was very long. But I don't know what took so long. I assume it's like backwards compatibility, or maybe there's some, I mean, it's a top level keyword fetch. So probably not backwards compatibility. That now that I think about that, it probably was implementation details. I don't know. Who cares? It's here now. Woo!
Yeah.
So what node
exciting.
version do you need to get fetch?
You need 17.5.
So it's landed. Is 17.5? Is it behind a experimental flag, or is it just like if you have 17.5, you're good to go?
That's a good question.
Let's see here.
I think that's when it lands. You can use the experimental fetch flag. I don't know. This article is not very clear. I'm trying to skim it.
Well,
Yeah,
it's a
it's a hard
JS
thing
party. It's not a
to-
JS research assignment, so we only go
Yeah,
so
it's
far,
hard
people.
hard to research too because the node fetch npm package is what comes up for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the pull request that was merged, the add fetch pull request, does say this adds a -- experimental fetch flag
I see.
that installs fetch, request, response, and headers as globals. And so I do believe 17.5 is when it lands, but it still might be a thing that you have to opt into until they're ready to consider it final and put it in for everybody. But who's not going to opt into this? Like, come on, give me the fetch.
Give me the fetch.
So handy. Yeah, experimental fetch right now, and then eventually it'll just be global.
Yeah,
So
I'm
what
looking.
this-
There's this big Hacker News thread about like why was this hard, or why was this? But it's like meandering all over the place, so it's hard to read on the fly. But we can include a link to that, and I think there, some of the authors are involved in that, as to kind of why was this such a problem. I think it is that like backwards compatibility, new APIs, like.
Well, just here we see that it's not just the fetch keyword. It's actually 4 top-level keywords. So maybe there was some more backwards compatibility with response, request, and headers.
Oh, here's a good doc. It looks like some of the challenge. So it says a large. Here's the challenges. So it's tightly integrated into the caching model of browsers. A large chunk of the spec is about caching, which is incompatible with the caching model of Node. Part of the spec is about the security model, which may not make sense in Node. Spec deals with the browser connection pool, which is different from how it might be handled in Node. It's global, which is also a challenge.
Sure.
And it uses what WG streams, which were at least at that point not supported in Node. I don't know if that has been added or not.
So implementation details. Anytime you're bringing a browser API into the server side, there's going to be, miscompatibilities, things that just don't make sense in that different context. And so decisions must be made and code must be written, it sounds like. But regardless, I think this will be a boon for developer productivity all around the world, especially when it lands globally without a flag. Because anytime you can just learn an API once and use it everywhere, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
Half
No
as
more
much
need
work.
to polyfill it. 'Cause
Exactly.
I don't know. I have definitely used Node Fetch before.
All right, so that has a big news. Probably going to win if this was a contest. No offense
Totally.
to you all. I've seen the other entries. But let's move on anyways and see what KBall has to offer. KBall, what's your story of the week?
Yeah, so I saw something float by a guy named Gergely Oros. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Gergely? Okay.
Mhm.
The guy who's behind the Pragmatic Engineer, which is kind of blown up recently. And it was sort of a quick mention that, Meta is now hiring engineering managers remote, always, not just engineers, at least in the UK. And I think it's like a hint to a larger story, which is around the continued sort of ripple effects of the move to remote work, how more and more companies, even these large companies, are having to say, you know what, this is not just a during the pandemic thing. Like, the world has changed. We're going to hire folks all over. We're going to have an ongoing remote plan. And I think there's some really interesting ripple effects in terms of how it levels salaries across the country and across the world. I mean, I think I've heard from folks who are hiring contractors in like Eastern Europe and the Philippines and things like that. And like folks who have been in places where salaries were much lower to do software development, they've seen like 50%, 70%, 100% increases in how much you can earn as a software developer. And I just think it's fascinating. There's so many different ripples. Like, one, that's a lot more money. It basically makes software development even more of an export industry, right? You can use that to bring money into wherever the heck you are. I think it potentially, like, they're making this money going to US based mostly and some European based multinational companies, which then means local software development shops are going to be starved for talent or having trouble competing, which means, yes, there's more money flowing in, but there's also like less development for local facing things. So like, it's just, the world is changing in a way that I find absolutely fascinating. And I'd be curious to hear y'all's take on it.
Yeah,
My-
for me, it's like the biggest silver lining of the pandemic, if the pandemic had any good points, is I've had to move to not tech hubs because my husband's in academia, and I've been kind of following him around, which is hilarious because we're about to move to San Francisco in a few weeks now that it's not cool anymore.
It's still
And-
cool.
Yeah, but if you live there long enough, it'll become cool again, and then you can say, "I lived here before; it was cool."
yeah, that's my
That's your plan.
Yeah, that's the long game. But like moving to non-tech hubs from a tech hub originally, it's like a totally different tech scene, which is great. Like I've learned a lot I lived in upstate New York for a while, and the tech scene there is pretty different, but I learned a lot from like the people there who were doing these different kinds of projects. But you don't really have access to, startups or the big companies. So it would have been awesome when I was moving there to have the option to pretty much work at any of these larger tech companies. And I can imagine the same in other countries. Although I've heard that most remote jobs, I don't know if this is true, are mostly remote in US and Canada. And I don't know if that usually applies to other countries.
So I know a lot of we're only hiring U.S.
Yeah.
For example, though we're all over. So a lot of U.S. based companies are. But I also Gergely has been publishing stuff on the impact of Eastern Europe. I don't know if those are folks coming from other parts like Western Europe hiring into Eastern Europe, but there's been huge changes there. The other thing that I heard is I was talking with someone who's a startup co-founder working mostly with contract developers at the moment. And the rates of hiring contract developers overseas have skyrocketed. So that may not be the same type of you're hiring full-time employees, but it's still demand for remote work and remote development in a way that is totally changing the landscape.
Yeah, I know it's difficult to hire full-time employees in other countries just for legal and tax reasons a lot of times for companies, but also from a team perspective, it can be hard for time zones too. I manage a team that is globally distributed right now. It's mostly US based, but there are some folks from not in the United States, and it's awesome that we have that opportunity now for sure. But that's one thing that I noticed though, is that those first couple of hours of the day are packed with meetings because they're the time that everybody's online, and so then the afternoon becomes a little bit less packed, and I'm sure it's the inverse for a lot of other teams. So I think that's a really interesting piece of it too, is in some roles, they're really, really good at being remote first and asynchronous first. And I wonder how that's going to also change the nature of work. It's going to make it probably less social than it is now. And I've noticed that just moving remote myself, is that, you used to go out with colleagues and get drinks or whatever after work, or you used to just have the water cooler chats, and you can kind of mimic that remote, but it isn't exactly the same. And so maybe it'll make it so that people are more reliant on their hobbies and things for social groups instead of their jobs. So another interesting piece of it.
Yeah, I lost the drinking with folks after work when I had kids, which was before the remote problem.
All right. I've always been remote, so I've never had any of those cool things. I would hang out with people at conferences, and that was my opportunity to see people. Because out here in Nebraska, KBall, where it's not for everyone, but it's for the cool ones.
I don't even have to troll you. You'll troll yourself.
I just
now.
preemptively know that you're gonna troll me. But there's a very small scene, and there was more of a scene before. There really isn't one now, and if there is, I'm getting old and kind of aging out of social scenes anyways. But for me, what's changed, first of all, I love the access to opportunity for more people. How cool is that? But
For sure.
from my vantage point, what's changed mostly is people are way more comfortable with online remote communications. It's made podcasting way easier, sounding better. People are they're used to being on Zoom all day, or they've invested in their setups, and that's been a cool side effect of this from a podcasting perspective. It's like, wow, we can have much better, higher quality conversations with more people because they're prepared for it. Whereas it used to be a lot of hand holding, a lot of technical issues. And there's some people that like their setup just couldn't, we're just never going to have them on a podcast. And it's just because of circumstantial things. And of course, access to high quality internet is now more important than ever. And we're starting to see, you know, municipalities and other government entities investing into those things and providing those as utilities or, you know, as a way of drawing people to your area. So I think that's really cool too. Just a lot of like trickle down effects of this change. All right, that's UK Ball. Amelia, it's your turn. Story of the week.
Oh man. Okay, so I couldn't choose one good one, so I chose two semi-okay ones.
If you add them together,
Yeah. Yeah. It's two semi-okay ones. So this first one I thought was a little bit terrifying, honestly, is some German state court found a website violating GDPR because they're serving fonts from Google Fonts, which tons of websites do. I do it on side projects because it's just easy, and like I guess the extra step of hosting my own fonts is like prohibitive. But I thought that was pretty intense. And it's because you're sending Google that, well, you're not sending it, but Google's getting the IP of your users, right?
yeah, so related to that, maybe it's related. Maybe somebody knows this more than I do, but there's been a back and forth between Meta slash Facebook and the European Union as of recent. And I've only caught the headlines. So if this is misinfo, you know, correct me, fact check me and stuff. But what I've read is that the gist of it is the European Union said if Facebook is going to operate and Instagram are going to operate in Europe, they must store the data for the European users in European countries, which we know is a difficult thing to get done just technically, right? It's doable. They have lots of money. They can get it done, but it's like a huge investment to get that done. Facebook slash Meta goes back to the European Union and says, well, we're just going to pull out of Europe then, which is a pretty big move for Instagram and for Facebook to do that. And then the European Union just says, cool, go for it. This is something.
Instant 5% productivity boost across Europe.
Yeah.
They said
I
something
think
like, "We think life would be better if you guys were gone," or something like that. It was
Exactly.
it was very saucy what they said.
Well, that was my reaction when I first saw the headline too. I was like, "Oh yeah, like sometimes I like seeing Instagram, but for the most part, I think life might be better without these. I don't think it's a huge loss."
Right. So it's kind of been a fun. I think it's like a game of chicken at this point. Like, who's actually gonna do something? I don't know. These are like global politics versus corporations, but it's similar because I don't know if it's a GDPR concerned, but it seems like it kind of is because it's like, well, it has to be stored on European servers if you're
Yeah.
going to operate in these countries.
That
It
seems
is related to GDPR. There's complicated so we work with enterprises in Europe and have to deal with GDPR and all these other things. And Germany's the worst, by the way, of all of them. But yeah, the interchange of or the flowing of data between EU and US is like there have been agreements, but they aren't well grounded legally. There has not been something that actually like is considered to be good. And I'm not a lawyer. This is like what I've learned from our lawyers, right, about this.
Sure.
But like there's sort of a bunch of precedents that are sort of used and applied, but are not considered to be super strong. And we can like get away with a lot of it because we basically have contracts we're working with enterprises, not individuals. So we have a contract with the enterprise and we said, this is the grounding that we're putting on this. And they either say yes or no. But once they've said that, it's in the contract, there's an agreement. When you're doing like a user agreement with individual users, I imagine it gets even much more complicated.
Yeah, I know that's a big thing with choosing a cloud provider too, is like the different regions. It matters for legal reasons as well.
Cool. Amelia, do you want to give your second one?
Yeah, I'm just glad I don't normally have to think about these things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
All right. The second one is also a little bit terrifying. And basically, there was this headline from DeepMind recently that showed they have this, I think, model named Alpha Code, and they had it respond to these like leak code computer, like the interview questions where there's a prompt and you have to write code that does a certain thing.
Right.
And it basically did better than 46% of the human participants in the competition. So this isn't just like Copilot, which is like assisting humans to write code. It's reading a prompt, which is all English, and then writing code that does a certain thing. So even if like those competition questions aren't necessarily the hardest, this is just like the beginning of something that's going to be computers writing code from specs, which is cool and scary.
The
So are
hiring
the
and
people that
manager in
lost,
me-
are they programmers? Or they're just
I
regular
don't think
people?
it actually like did a live competition, but I think they have stats of like past competitions, and then it saw how it did compared to those people.
So the hiring manager in me who has seen submissions to requested code competitions and whatever does
Yeah.
not find this at all surprising.
Ah!
Right.
You would be shocked
I mean,
how
does that
many
mean,
people
like-
who call themselves developers cannot solve these problems.
Right. Why do you think that is? Is it, they're just trying to get some work, or is it delusions of grandeur? I don't know. Like, sometimes you have to trick yourself into thinking you can do a thing, and then eventually you can do it. But what do you think about that? I mean, because if it was me, I just
mean-
wouldn't apply, you know?
It's a good question, right? But this is why like the FizzBuzz interview question is a thing, because there's a bunch of people who like will apply to programming jobs and literally cannot program, and I don't know what's going on there. I mean, I think maybe they've only ever operated where they're like copying and pasting code that exists and like trial and error to see if they can get it right, and they just have not developed the mental models at all. But I really don't know.
Yeah. Maybe the opportunity is just so great. They're like, well, I might as well go for it. Because I mean, we're talking about the salaries. It's a great living, and it's only getting better. And then meanwhile, other career choices are getting less attractive because of global macroeconomics and things. I don't know. It's definitely confusing. But
Yeah, a piece of me on the other hand though is really excited about this idea that like we don't have to write the boring stuff anymore, because that's one of the most annoying parts of being a developer, I think, is like writing a form and form submission logic over and over and over again. And so if that can be abstracted away or done for a developer, that's a huge boon to everybody's productivity, because then you
Right.
can focus on the hard stuff. And that's why we're all programmers in the first place. It's not because we want to do the same repetitive stuff over and over again. It's because we want to solve the new problems and build the cool stuff. And maybe this will leave us more opportunity to do that. So that's something that I'm a little bit excited about.
that is cool. I mean, if you think about what I just said earlier in the show, I've coded for many, many years. I took some time off, and then it's like, I gotta go look up the syntax for a for loop, And I'm just like, I just want to loop over the things. I don't care about the details. I've written these loops in multiple languages. It's like I don't want to do the repetitive. I mean, actually, I technically do want to do a repetitive thing, but you know what I'm saying. I just want to do it 7 times and then stop. Yeah, and that's more along the lines of what we're currently seeing from tools like GitHub Copilot and Tab 9. This is like, hey, write a spec, and it does the coding. That's a whole nother level of abstraction. In fact, we had the CEO and founder of Tab 9 on the changelog. That they have a AI code assistant, and I asked him about that. I'm like, is the end game where I can write a spec and the program just does it? He's like, no. The end game is you're better at programming because you don't have to do the repetitive things.
There you
In the
go.
medium term end game, and like he's like, well, on an infinite timeline, of course, but what they're aiming for is like superpowers for people. More people can program, do superpowers, whereas
Yeah.
this is more operating on like hey, take the human out of it kind of a thing.
it reminds me of like the no code tools, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
no code has continually gotten better over time, and what it continues to do is sort of move up the bar of um, kind of how much can be done without bringing a programmer, but like always within the bounds of like you can only solve solved problems, right? Like if you want to make a marketing website, a no code tool is phenomenal because that's a well solved problem. There's not much innovative, there's not much new going on there, and for many cases that's what you need. But anytime you're pushing the edge or trying to do something differently, it can't handle it. And I suspect this will be
Yeah.
the same for any sort of AI trained tool because it's going to be trained on the bulk of things which are usually like not the unique cases. Like if it's
Yeah,
pattern
totally
matching, it's
agree
not
with
going to
that.
be able to solve anything novel necessarily.
Yeah. And in the immediate term, I'm really excited about those like hyper developer productivity tools like Copilot or these like kind of low code but developer first low code solutions that just automate the boring stuff for you, and then you can focus on those things. So
For sure. Ultimately, I think the value that we provide is synthesizing ideas into working systems, right? And that
yeah,
doesn't change regardless of what level you're operating at. So you just move higher up the stack. You synthesize more complex ideas or more ideas per capita than you did before, and you're just more productive. So I think it's going to be a win for all of us. Well, I will say Allie did steal my story of the week, so I submit this one knowing that it's not as good. But it's all right. It's all friendly competition around here. We're not actually trying to win. There is a post from Rauschma, Dr. Axel Rauschmeyer. I feel like he's been on the show before or agreed to. I can't remember if we actually had him on the show, but you probably know him as a prolific author and writer in the JavaScript space, very good teacher. He has a post from the end of January about the pipe operator coming to JavaScript. He has introduction and use cases. So we've talked about the pipe operator before. It's been in development for many years. I think going all the way back to 2015 is when it first was introduced conceptually as what might be a cool new piece of JavaScript. It's now in stage 2, which if you're familiar with the stages of TC39, there's like 4 of them, I believe. Stage 2 is pretty far down the road, but obviously not in your browser yet. But the pipe operator is a very cool conceptual thing and one that I've enjoyed in the Elixir land. It's also, I think, F#. Some other languages also have pipe operators. And the idea is to bring this to JavaScript. And he has a really, really well written layout of what it is, why it's important, how to use it, what it currently looks like, asking questions like, do we really need one of these? And then other ways it could have been implemented. So I'm excited that this is continuing to make Let me start that over. I'm excited that this is continuing to make progress. And I just submit this article as a really nice rundown of what it is and kind of where it stands. What do y'all think? Pipe operator? Something that you want? You wanted fetch. You got it. How about pipes?
Sounds
Don't-
cool.
Guess
I
so?
personally lean away from it just because I think that there's such a high learning curve for those functional programming languages because there's so many they're so symbol based, and I see pros and cons to that. Like I think it's a pro for making programming languages more universal globally because I think that's a huge learning curve for programming as is, that you pretty much have to program in English, and so the more like operator based we make these languages, the more globally useful they are. But on the other hand, I do think that it looks a little bit more intimidating at first glance to a new developer, and that's something that I feel a little bit split on personally.
Fair. I
totally
should
hear
say for the listener that the actual operator is a combination of the pipe, which is like the straight line, vertical line, and the greater than sign, which forms kind of like a rightward facing triangle.
Yeah, I think that is a real concern of like, and we've had that problem in JavaScript generally over the last
Yeah, arrow functions.
few few years where it's become much more intimidating to start in JavaScript. I mean, personally, I would love this operator to exist because I love a functional programming style, and doing it in JavaScript right now feels very awkward and verbose. So I think it would be very personally useful, but I am concerned about the learning curve and the kind of increasing barrier to entry we're putting on
Yeah.
JavaScript.
Yeah, I used to teach JavaScript as my full-time job, and teaching people the difference between different types of functions in JavaScript was just kind of a nightmare as is. And the arrow functions specifically, it was like why would I ever use this? Like,
Right.
where does the arrow go? Where do all the things go? And so that's what scares me a little bit about this as well, is like somebody new to JavaScript seeing it and being like all wigged out by it or something like that.
Yes, I think the arrow function specifically had a bunch of extra baggage around it, around optionality, and the fact that it's not syntax sugar, it's actually like changing variable scopes versus the
Yeah.
function keyword is very confusing. And there was just too much like, hey, if you don't need this, take it out, and it still works. And I'm like, as somebody who casually uses those, I still have to remember like, well, why, where is the actually parameters here, and which ones are where's the function? What's it returning? Like, it's still, there's just too many ways you can use it, in my opinion. I think the pipeline operator is simpler conceptually. I like that it promotes functional practices, maybe without even knowing it. Like it's kind of like chaining, it's promoting you to send data through a pipeline. I think that's cool, but I agree. Just adding one more operator to a language that's already difficult to wrap your mind around, especially at the beginning, could be raising that learning curve.
Especially because it doesn't add new functionality. It's just adding another way to do a thing that you can already do.
I totally agree that it's more syntax to learn, but I will play devil's advocate, which I think it can clean up code. So it's a new concept that it's one more thing to learn, but once you do learn it, maybe it crosses the threshold to being useful enough to like, once you know it, you can look at code and it's like a little bit faster to read each time. But
Yeah. Has
Not
anybody
sure.
written D3 before?
yeah.
Like the
Unfortunately,
level
or
of
twice.
change
probably
on
Amelia
that?
probably has a lot more. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like its
But
own little
that's
That was
DSL.
my thought.
You know?
It's like, okay, it actually might make like D3 cleaner.
Well, that's the thing, right? We actually love chaining like APIs, right? The chaining
Sure.
API that you get with jQuery and things like that. But right now in JavaScript, that requires specially setting up your API to return objects that understand the API, right? And
Exactly.
it's like a particular
Yeah.
architectural constraint, whereas this enables you to do that type of chaining with bare functions.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I know this feature is in Elixir. I write a lot of Elixir. I use it nonstop. I would use it nonstop in JavaScript myself personally, and so that makes me excited about it. And the fact that what you just said right there, KBall, like we've all seen the value of it in jQuery, but jQuery jumps through very specific hoops in order to make that available, whereas this makes it available to pretty much any function, as long as you're passing the right thing in to the first argument. Anyways, if you're confused about the pipe operator, want to check it out, not sure what we're talking about, definitely check out his post, which is in our show notes. And if you're excited about it, let us know. If you think it's a terrible idea, also let us know. We want to hear from you at JSPartyFM or any of our individual handles as well. You can also email jsparty@changelog.com. If you have long things to say, we do read all of our emails. All right, this
Before
has
we
been
close the segment, I
Oh,
just saw, tied to one of our previous stories, the court in France declared that use of Google Analytics violates GDPR. There is
wow.
a gathering storm here going on, and the implications are going to be, it'll be fascinating to watch how this all shakes out.
Yeah, like basically any third-party server that you hit. It's scary. But cool, but scary.
We'll end it right there. Scary, but cool, but scary. All right, we're on a break now, and we'll come back and do TIL. Marker right there. Anybody need to step away? Okay. Better grab this one for the show notes since I just added it last second. All right, we are back, and it is time to play a little game we like to call Today I Learned. Hold on a second. Do I not have it in the soundboard? All right, hang tight. We're not back yet. Let me drag it in there. Let's see how this
Take two.
rich JavaScript app works. Can I drag a file in and play it without reloading, without it breaking? Have it just work? What do you guys think? What are the odds?
45%.
It's
Was
just
it
gonna
written by
replace this
AlphaFold?
spot in your browser with like the file browser, and you're gonna
Yeah, that's my
jump off of
fear,
this.
right? Like all of a sudden I'm just like looking at the file, like the MP3 or whatever, and you guys are just gone. I'm kind of scared of this actually. Where is it?
It is impressive when technology feels like magic, though. If you drag it and it just works, like that'll feel magical.
I agree. The other challenge we have is I can't find the stinking. Oh, there it is. Jingles. I have a folder called Jingles. No wonder. Okay. Let's into it here. All right, TIL. I'm going to drag it in now. If I disappear, just hang tight. I'll come back. Oh, I'm still here. Where's the file? There it is. All right, TIL. Can you hear this?
I got a story that I'm going to tell. You're gonna love it, baby, think it's swell. I only learned it today, the TIL.
Is that another Matt Ryer hit?
It is.
That's
That
good.
man is amazing.
So this is where we share things that we've learned today with air quotes around today because, you know, it's still early. So recently. But these could be bigger things or small things. It's kind of like pro tips, but more pointed and technical. Maybe it's a new API. Maybe it's a browser quirk. Maybe it's something you can do with Git. Whatever it is, we share it with y'all so you can benefit. Allie, we'll go to you first.
Okay, so mine's not technical, I'm sorry, but I've been listening to a lot of the Huberman's Lab podcast, which is amazing. It's like all neuroscience. And so for years, I've been teaching students like you're supposed to fail when you're learning at certain times. You're not supposed to have this happy path all the time where you just start learning and there's this linear trajectory and then magically you know the skill at the end. Instead, there's a bunch of peaks and valleys, and that failure actually helps you learn. But I learned that there's actually a number for this. So 85% of the time when you're learning, you should be succeeding. And that makes it so that you feel confident and you're not going to just completely drop off and quit. But 15% of the time, you should be failing when you're learning that thing. And that failure state actually makes it so that you are more able to learn in the future. And it's meaning that you're actually challenging yourself as well. So if you're learning, make sure that you're actually struggling at points and don't just take the really, really easy path. Make sure that you are challenging yourself. And in the inverse, too, if you are struggling, that's okay. You're supposed to be struggling when you're learning something new. But if you're struggling like 50% of the time or 75% of the time, maybe scale it back a little bit and challenge yourself a little bit less because it could become really demotivating and could be less than optimal for learning.
That is super interesting.
I love that.
I assume it's data backed. Do you know
Yes.
how much individual variation there was? Like, is it pretty tightly around 15% for everyone, or is it like a wide range? Like some people could be failing much more and be optimal, and others much higher.
That's a good question. I think it's just a zone that's generally the best for the most amount of people. So it's like it's obviously impossible to measure like exactly 15% of the time I'm failing, 85% of the time I'm succeeding, but it's just that general ballpark, I think. And it was a study at Princeton University, and I'll link it in the show notes for the full.
So
full
have you been
thing.
able to put this into practice? And do you count your fails? Because I try to ignore mine, if at all possible.
Well,
You don't obsess over them?
it's not something that I like
Try not
put
to.
into an Excel sheet or anything like that, but I do try to keep that in mind when I'm learning something, is that I'm not going to be good at it right away. Like right now, okay, so I found out that there was a curling open house, like curling in the Olympics right
Yeah.
here where I live. And then I went and did that. And then now I'm in a curling league for beginners, which is
That is
hysterical,
cool.
I think. But I think that as somebody who teaches people, it's really important that I put myself in those beginners mindset for different things. And it's usually not code related anymore. But doing something that puts me outside of my comfort zone and that I'm going to suck at first. Like I fell over so many times when I was trying to push this thing on ice. And so, yes, I'm definitely failing probably more than 15% right now at curling, but it is something where if I am failing more than that 15% of the time, maybe I need to just repeat that same thing over and over again instead of progressing to the next step.
Yeah.
I like felt phantom pain in my lower back / butt when you said curling because of the one time I tried and I felt so much.
I've never tried it. I've done a lot of shuffleboard, which is basically curling on easy mode because you're not on ice. And I mean, that pretty much makes it easier right there, right?
It's
Uh,
really fun. Would highly recommend.
Are there like curling, where do you like ice plex? Like, do you do the same place you go ice skating or where would you actually go curling?
So at least around here, there are different curling centers. So you can just look it up, like your city and then curling center.
Huh.
And then they do lessons very regularly, but then they also have different leagues for people at different levels.
That's cool.
I don't think I've
So-
ever seen curling. Is it like longer than a normal ice skating rink? So you have to have like a special.
It actually is pretty close to the length of a normal ice rink. In fact, it might actually be the same length, but you're pushing like it's the thing that you're curling. The I forget what it's called. The thing that you're pushing weighs like 40 pounds. So
Oh,
it
man.
skates on the ice, but then it actually stops at some point too.
Are they called a stone? I think.
Yeah,
Like
rock or
curling
stone. There you go. There you go. You got it.
I was Googling curling ball. What do you push?
No, that I've been curling exactly once. It was like a team bonding thing, and it is burned in my memory because I collided with
Did you-
someone, fell on my ass, and like
Oh
just
no.
it hurt.
So I stick to shuffleboard because it's like more like a 95% success rate, you know, which is more my comfort zone than 85%. All right, let's. That's a very good one, Allie. I like that one, even though it's non-technical, it still counts because hey, it's very
It's data
cool.
backed. That's technical.
That's true.
Yeah, there
Plus,
you go.
like, who cares what the actual segments are called? You know, just say what you want. Amelia, your turn.
What did I want to talk about? Oh, CSS Cascade Layers. Super exciting.
Ooh.
They came out in Firefox 2 days ago, so they're in the current version of Firefox 97, and it's basically, so for the CSS Cascade, there's all these layers where it decides which styles to apply. If you say body background blue and also body background red, is it going to be blue or is it going to be red? And that depends, like, did you use a tag for the selector? Did you use a class? Did you use an ID? And I think a lot of trouble that people run into with CSS has to do with this, because they'll add a style and then it won't work, and then they won't understand why, and then they'll learn that if you add another part to the selector, it'll override another selector. So it's like really frustrating. And I think we've all been there. And for the Cascade layers, you can basically create different layers, and you can have like a utility layer, like a core styles layer, like an element specific layer, and then the order in which you declare those layers, I think, oh my God, I don't remember. I think if it's declared earlier, it wins. No, I think if it's declared later, it wins. I don't know, one or the other, but it'll make it easier to basically handle CSS styles and make it really explicit which one actually wins if there's like two colliding ones with the same specificity.
Interesting. I feel like this is the type of thing we used to do by like very carefully crafting the order of when your CSS things, and you'd
Yeah.
have those like these frameworks that would have the layers of like, here's the base layer and here's the graphical layer and here's your overrides and all of that, but they do it by very careful ordering and specificity numbers and what have you. So this is basically letting you just say that in code. It's like getting rid of, it's the same thing we did for JavaScript with modules of like getting rid of the fact that the careful ordering of layers.
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah, exactly.
That's nice.
I've also used BEM a lot, which is like basically you only do one class for every single style, which gets really verbose. So I'm super excited about this.
Our current site is done in BEM, and I'm ready for somebody to redo it. But it's not gonna be me, because I would just do it in BEM again. I don't know how to do it any better.
You're not going to tailwind it up?
I thought about it. No, I'm not going to. But I thought about it. But that's what I do. I think about things. You know, every time something new comes out, I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I think about it. And then I just leave it alone. It's kind of my MO. I will go next, because KBall needs time to think. Did you know there's no longer a caching benefit to loading scripts from a shared CDN? So, such as unpackage, or like we used to load everything off of jQuery CDN, or these CDNs that were there, and there was this cool side effect where if we're all using the exact same version, or if you were cool enough with writing with like a generic version without version numbers, you have the side effect of everybody who has already went to somebody else's website and loaded that JavaScript file, as long as it's the same CDN, is cached in their browser already. So it's like this cool benefit, and that doesn't exist anymore. And I learned that recently. I actually learned it from a tweet from Lori Voss, who also learned it recently, which led to a post by Stefan Judas. Say goodbye to resource caching across sites and domains. It's not actually new. I think it changed back in October, maybe even October 2020. So it might be like I'm late to this party. KBall's nodding along, so I think he's known this for a while.
I remember hearing this quite a while ago, but also like everything since March 2020 is like 1 month over and over and over again. So like, really, who cares?
Well, that's why it's like cool. It's like TIL. Like today, I learned it. I just learned this. It's not new, but I learned it, and maybe it's new to you. It was new to me. It's not like I'm using it anyways anymore, but I just thought it was a cool thing that we could all do. It kind of felt like a community thing to do. It's like, hey, let's all just load this one JavaScript file once and be done with it. But that is now gone, and I think it's gone for good reasons. I think it actually improves privacy and security quite a bit, and other things. And I think the caching benefits were somewhat nominal anyways. So anyways, I'll link up those, this article, Say Goodbye to Resource Caching Across Sites and Domains. And you can read about it for yourself. But yeah, I just learned that recently, and I was like, huh. Shows what I know. But now I know, and now you know. All right, KBall, I stalled long enough. I'm acting as if you're not prepared, but you totally are. I'm just messing with you. It's your turn. What do you got?
Yeah, so I have kind of a fun one. This is in the TypeScript world. And I actually, when I was trying to track this down, I consulted our TypeScript expert, Nick Nisi. So I had a bug that I had to fix the other day where a React component was failing. And it was failing because it was getting past a prop that it thought it could render as a React node. And the caller had changed it to be something else that needed to be interpreted in a certain way. And so, quick bug fix, noticed it, changed the caller to pass the React node, and it was fine. But then I was like, wait, this is typed. Like the prop declaration, or the component declared it to be expecting a React node. How did it possibly not get caught by TypeScript that we were passing something that React didn't know how to render? And I spent a while trying to dig into this. Like, did we do something wrong? What's going on? It turns out that the TypeScript definitions for React components, React node, and all of these things are coming from definitely typed. And React node is defined as it's either a React child, a React fragment, a React portal, Boolean, null, or undefined. React fragment, for reasons that I don't know, is defined as empty object or what is it? Empty object or React node array, which basically empty object is essentially any, right? This is like the most permissive type you could possibly have. So if you are using types in a React app and you are typing props as a React node because you think that's going to save you or keep you from passing things that are going to, not be able to be rendered as React, you are not protected. React.React node as a type is meaningless. It does not protect you from anything. This is apparently a known issue. It's in the GitHub repo since 2018.
Wow.
There have been discussions. There was a proposed fix, and then the discussion dropped and nobody's fixed it. So I am looking at doing like a patch locally in our application around it. But broadly, the thing I learned today is if you're relying on the React.React node type, you are completely and utterly unprotected from type errors.
Oh man, what are you using instead?
So in the discussion, so TBD, because I'm still trying to figure this out. In the discussion around the issue, there was a proposed different definition for React fragment that was like a little bit more well defined. So what I'm looking at doing is there's like a what's it called, like package patch or node patch. There's a way you can patch node modules locally. So I'm looking at patching just the definition of React fragment, which is the one that's like opening this type up. I took the patch from the description, put it in, and ran my type checker, and it blew up with errors. So I actually don't know if that's going to be a viable option yet or not. Another thing that I was considering, if that doesn't work, is actually just defining a custom type that kind of captures all the subcases that we care about and then just doesn't open, and it'll probably miss one or two things that in theory would also work, but that we don't use. And so then we don't have to worry about it. So yeah, not the solution that I'm coming to is still in progress, but the thing that I learned is this thing is broken and it's leaving your type system open to all sorts of errors that will only show up at runtime.
Have you tried JavaScript?
Oh, then
I hear
I'd
it's pretty
be
good.
unprotected everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean,
none of this you would have gone through none of this trouble and been landed in the exact same position on these errors.
Yeah,
they would have
but,
cropped up at runtime.
The whole reason to do this is so that we can eliminate these whole classes of errors from ever making it into runtime. And so to discover that we were very much unprotected for what is it? I mean, like I grepped our code base. There's like 180 references to React node types in different places. So like this is something that we are relying on quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a false sense of security.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully you find a fix. That is interesting. So probably if you guys are using it that much, probably a lot of people are using it a lot, don't you think? It's pretty common.
I suspect that many people are using this and thinking they are more protected than they are.
Well, if you could come up with a solution and fix it, you could help like probably thousands of people.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're looking for is like, okay, if we can find the fix, then we can try to make the time to get it submitted back upstream and get it to work, or at least post how we fixed it on there so that other folks who run into this can do it. But yeah,
that's a big thing to learn. All right, there you have it, TIL. Now, our final segment today is going to be a project focus. Normally, what we would do is we would pick a project, the four of us would check it out, we would tell you all about it and discuss. We're going to do it a little bit differently today. We actually have a very special guest. The author of the VEST framework joined me for an exclusive interview insofar as we were the only two there. So it was exclusive that way. And told me all about it. So we will end TIL, say goodbye to Amelia, KBall, and Allie. Thanks so much for hanging out. This has been lots of fun. And we'll say hello to our project focus on the other side of this break. But that is our show for today. Thank you all for hanging out with me. And we'll see y'all next time. I wasn't really sure exactly how to manage that transition. Hopefully that works. And if it doesn't, I'll just re-record myself later. All right. Good stuff, y'all. So it looks like the documents got pretty much every link in it.
Yeah, I tried to update the ones that I added or that I brought up in other people's spots.
Yeah,
in
what might
there.
be cool while we're all here is to take the ones that you added that don't have like descriptions and like throw them in at the bottom with a description or something. And then I'll handle it from there. I'll clean it up later. But that'll help me put the shows together in a more reasonable fashion. Cool. All right. We'll say goodbye to our live listeners. We will stop our recordings, and that'll be that.